Hello, good night. Good night, all Guyanese, wherever you are, and probably non-Guyanese too that are looking at Guyana right now. Guyana is a hot spot around the world. So there are probably a lot of people who are looking at this show, Guyanese or not. And whether you're in your kitchen or you're in your living room or in your bottom house, wherever you are, welcome to another show on Globespan. Tonight's show is moving forward, and we'll be speaking specifically on infrastructure and economic development. I've got three fantastic guests who can certainly do a good job with this subject. But before we go further, we just want to give us thanks to the team at Globespan who've been working tirelessly to bring these show. We really appreciate the work that you guys are putting in. These show does come at a cost, so please donate to contribute to this show to keep it going. This is where we meet and we talk about the issues, and hopefully it reaches the right ears, and policies can be carved and so on. So I know Devin is going to put up the website so you can make your contribution to this show. Tonight, of course, we're talking about infrastructure and development. And you would have noticed, like me and like so many others, that over the past few weeks, especially after the passing of the almost $330 billion budget, there were so many headlines. There's been a barrage of headlines about a bridge, and the president went and kind of looked at the spot where the bridge is going to be. He went to the airport, and talk to the staff there, but what happened and what needs to happen. We heard about the highway, the Oval Highway. There's so much that's happening. Lots of headlines in all colors. Today's Chronicle was about creating the right environment for business and so on. So while these headlines are just blaring at us, we welcome them. It's a break from the headlines of protest and of killing and of crime and election issues and so on. We appreciate the break. We appreciate that it's going in the right direction. So to talk tonight about what's happening that's pushing these headlines and hopefully pushing other areas in Guyana's development, I have Minister Deodat Indar. He's the minister within the Ministry of Public Works. I think it was formerly called the Ministry of Infrastructure, Public Works now. And we have welcome Minister, and we have the president of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Private Sector Commission. He holds two hats tonight, Mr. Nicholas Boyer, and a staple here on Globespan, we have Timothy Jonas, who's admired by his independent thought and his thinking and his ability to see through some of the issues and so on. So welcome, guys. Welcome you all to this show, and I look forward to an engaging discussion.
Thanks, Saladin. Good to be here.
Thank you very much.
Good. So let's take it from the top. Minister Deodat, you're a newly minted minister, and I think this is your first speeches in the Parliament. I looked at a few of your speeches; they were very impressive. What are your thoughts about being a minister, especially in a ministry that is so important to development?
Thank you very much for the kind words on the speeches in Parliament. Parliament is a different thing for me, as well as being in government. Please be reminded that I used to sit in the chair that Nicholas is currently sitting in as the president of the chamber, and I was the vice chairman of the Private Sector Commission. So I do have that private sector background in the leadership as well. But I came from a background of 22 years in finance and accounting and business and so on, right? And as time go by, I ventured into different things. But politics and government is a different kettle of fish. there are much more systems and processes and laws and so on that one have to make sure that you govern equitably. In the private sector, you have a CEO, you have a chairman, and you work fast. That's why they say private sector is the engine of growth, because you work fast, you make decisions fast, you deliver quickly.
Yeah.
Right? It's much more different from what we see in government. Government, the process have to brace everybody in a positive manner. So it's different. Serving Dr. Fanali and Prime Minister and Vice President Jaglio, serving them, the people of Guyana, is a different feeling. I must tell you, it's a different feeling when you go out into the country. The problems are very wide. The problems are very much known. So we have our hands full when it comes to dealing with the problems of Guyanese. But you have to do the best job you can do, and you have to be sincere in doing it too.
And tell me, you said and of course we all know you were former president of the Private Sector Commission, and you have 20 years in finance at the private sector level. What have you learned in the private sector that you believe you can use effectively and efficiently in the government?
Actually, Salim, everything from business case justification, from MPAV analysis, from a project document, from talking about systems, talking about delivery of services, efficient services, talking about investment to generate wealth and growth. Every single thing that you learn in private sector can be used in government. Right? How you use it is a different thing. How fast you use it is another thing, and where you use it is another thing. So private sector is actually, private sector people, they have a different mentality. Look at the United States. They have a private sector man at the helm in President Trump. Many parts of the world, you see business people are going into politics and change the modus operandi of government, and change the culture of government. Because, as they say, private sector, they does things differently and faster, more efficient, and at cheaper costs. And if you can just use a fraction of that skill in government, you'll have a successful government.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nicholas, you would have noticed, just like I do and so many other Guyanese, that there's a lot of private sector and non-hardcore political persons who've been appointed as ministers and board members across the government. Is that a welcoming sign for you as to what can possibly happen in terms of making the government a lot more efficient?
Yes, certainly. I mean, for us, what we've seen, and we've had some interactions with His Excellency Dr. Fanali. He basically said he wanted to involve the private sector more in the decision-making processes in his government. And so some of the ways he's thought to do that is to appoint private sector persons first. We've seen members in the cabinet, such as the Honorable Minister Indar there. I worked very closely with him because I was the senior vice president while he was president. And there are a number of other such ministers that he had not named to his cabinet. And then you see the board appointments. So for us, we are very happy with that, because we in the private sector like to say that we have a certain manner of thinking. We try to be incredibly efficient with resources, and we try to draw straight lines through problems to solutions. I think it might be something that we're quite proud of, that is the way we operate. So for us, as a private sector commission representing private sector of Guyana, it is a positive sign for us in how we feel this government will deliver solutions to the country.
Timothy, and your thoughts on the new ministers and, of course, board members who many of whom are not traditional politicians who came from private sector, and even on both sides, member of parliaments. Many of them were not members of parliament before, And in fact, a lot of the quote unquote older guys have been relegated back to the office of their parties. So is that a positive sign for Guyana? I think this is the first time I've seen it happening in quite a while. Is that something positive? Is it something that we should be looking at trending more?
Definitely, I like it. And before I go on, let me first of all personalize it in the with the people that we have here. I want to congratulate our new Minister Dio. He has a wonderful history in finance, dealing with things commercial. And his answer to you I liked very much, because his experience is looking at things from one end of the spectrum, which is preparing plans, making proposals. Now he's at the other end of the spectrum, and therefore is in a really nice position, having that experience, to be able to see the strengths and weaknesses in what other people will be submitting to him.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to particularly like Dio because he's no nonsense. He's down to earth. He doesn't try to fancy things up. So I really wish him well, and I wanted to tell him this is the first opportunity I've had to, talk to him or talk in a forum since elections. So I wanted to let him know that in public so everybody could hear. That way if 6 months we disagree about something, we could quarrel about it, and he'll remember this and won't feel too bad about it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Timothy.
To me, he is an example of what we are seeing. I like so many of the others that I've seen. Onij Waldron, the youth, the fact that they are new faces that are untainted and unburdened by the past. I think that's a good thing. The criticism and the fear, of course, is that inexperience may lead to a dependence. But to tell you the truth, I don't see that as a huge midterm issue, because the people I am seeing are some smart people, are going to come onto the job, learn on the job, and develop their own instincts and their own capabilities. And I don't see them sucking up for very long. I see them taking their own charge and doing their own thing. I hope I'm right about that. The reason you have not heard me criticize since elections on anything is these folk are new and need to get a chance to settle in and to get doing what they're doing. We've seen a lot of activity, a flurry of activity. It's all good so far. Couple reservations I have that I'm sure we will explore, but to answer your question, I think that it's a time to be buoyant, a time to look forward and recognize that the new governments cut their cards right. They have come in at a time when everybody is buoyant, everybody is looking up, we are all bullish, and we know a lot of money is going to be coming into this country. So it would be hard to really get things wrong at this stage, and it would be easy to take us to a completely new and wonderful future.
Great. So, and absolutely, I know that I've seen a lot of activities, and I've seen a lot more headlines and activities, but I'm hoping that those headlines translate into activities down the line. With COVID and everything else, it is going to move slower. We understand that, but we look forward to young ministers like Indar and so on to make a mark and change the course of Guyana. We were certainly heading in the wrong direction, and I think, like Jonas mentioned, having the right people there that came from the private sector can allow for direction. Now, I want to get back to Nicholas. We're talking here about infrastructure in this first segment. In terms of the private sector, I know you guys talk a lot. You engage. You have your own forums. What is your priority? When I say your, I mean the private sector priority, as it relates to infrastructure, in terms of what direction, because infrastructure is not meant to be an isolated series of activities. It's meant to support something, and that something should be, a big part of it is private sector. So, and this budget has been labeled a private sector sort of budget, right? So, Nicholas, what is the priority from the private sector as it relates to infrastructure?
Thanks for that question, Sal. So let's talk about a couple of things. So firstly, I just saw kind of a piece of breaking news that the government approved the Payara development on the Oil Now blog, and it's an interesting way to kick off the conversation because you have the approval of Payara and we have COVID-19. And infrastructure is an interesting conversation that links these back to the budget as well as to the private sector. When we look at the US, a more developed market, because you're sitting there, when the US goes into a recession and wants to get out of that recession, you see one of the first discussions when they talk about policy to help stimulate their way out of the recession, one of the first considerations they talk about is infrastructure, right? And when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about roads, bridges, basically the public property that the private sector and all of us need to get about doing our day-to-day business. Now in Guyana, we are suffering from a fact that we are a very small population in country, 800,000, and we are being taxed to carry infrastructure that is more massive than all of the Caribbean islands put together. You could chain all of these islands together and fit them in one of our rivers. So you think about it, you're taking a population of 800,000 people and taxing them to have kept up infrastructure, roads, bridges, stellings, right? That would wrap most of the Caribbean around 2-3 times in space of development. Now, what oil does, oil brings a new funding source to really improve and increase our infrastructure. And what that does, coming back to the private sector, is it unlocks new areas of development. When you start to look at some of the primary areas of production in our economy, you look at mining, they need those roads. Mining benefited off of logging because a lot of roads were maintained by, a lot of the roads to the hinterland in Guyana were maintained by some of the Chinese logging companies. So when we got rid of those Chinese logging companies and those roads became dilapidated, because these are laterite roads that are not all weather. When you hit a rainy season, that's it for the road. So you can imagine when we start to change that infrastructure, we unlock development, right? It becomes cheaper to do mining. When you think of agriculture, right, and you think about the natural expansion of the city, I know that Indar is going to talk about one of the major projects that they're doing, which is the Demerara Harbor Bridge, as well as, they're finally getting action on that road that is going to run from Ogle. I think the first phase is to Eccles, and then they talked about a second phase to the airport. And as well as talking about improving the airport that they were handed, which is supposed to be an upgrade, but not where we envision it. So you take tourism. Tourism needs a better airport than what we have. It needs more roads, because how can you safely get to Region 9 easily? So for us, so many sectors, the potential of them are being held back by a lack of quality infrastructure. And the challenge was that we didn't have that strong funding source to really invest in the quantum of infrastructure and the quantum and quality of infrastructure that we needed. Now that we have that, if with persons like Indar in place, I'm sure that they're going to bring that private sector view and really bring it to bear on the existing infrastructure as well as the planning for new infrastructure. One of the madness that I see is, where most of your rice in Guyana is shipped from? Most of your rice that is grown from like the MMA region heading east has to come all the way, be trucked to Georgetown to be shipped out. So you'll see, and I do business on Water Street, I see thousands of tons of rice passing through, coming all the way east, being driven 2-3 hours, because there are rivers right there, like the Berbice River, that can be used to export that rice if we put a port there. So you can imagine that there's a lot of opportunity for investing in infrastructure. And what it does, it gives government great return on investment because it allows more sectors to open up and really unleashes the entrepreneurial abilities of the Guyanese people.
And Timothy, your thoughts on where you believe Guyana's focus or priority should be as it relates to infrastructure?
It's hard to improve on what Nick has said. He's right about the wharf. The fact that we're one port of entry or one customs point is the east bank of the Demerara River in the vicinity of Georgetown, where all the shipping goes. Now, oil is here. Oil has to be used to develop our traditional sectors. And the most important of those traditional sectors for me is agriculture. We have the bones of being an agricultural producer that can supply everything and anything. We have the bones of that. I would like to see that happen, and there are a number of things that need to be done. Now, roads, that's the first thing. I know that we're talking about a road coming up from Lethem, and I've heard a number of theories advanced. One of them, there's an old cattle trail that runs up from Lethem, runs up the Berbice River, goes to New Amsterdam. And I've heard people theorizing about that. I don't like that idea. You see, as Nick says, our agricultural belt goes all the way up to Equitable. Our mining and logging areas are toward the west. And for that reason, if we try to run a road from Lethem along that cattle trail, we will make it more difficult to interconnect. And what we have to understand is that our industries will be more successful and more efficient if there is an interconnection and an interdependency. The example he gave that I really like is the fact that our timber companies were maintaining that road going into Lethem. They weren't doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. They were doing it because it's actually cheaper for them to make sure that their trucks can carry the heavy logs and the heavy equipment over a smooth road without bringing out an axle or losing a wheel or causing major damage by going into some of the potholes that we began to see when the government chased Barama out and made life difficult for Demerara Timbers and got rid of Baishan Lin. Those companies were maintaining the road, and by maintaining the road, they were making their lives easier, but they were also making it easier for people to access driving into Lethem, for the miners to use the same roads to access mining areas. As soon as they got chased out, life got hard.
Yeah.
So that kind of interdependence, recognizing that when you build a road from Lethem, it's not just so that Brazil can access our ports, but it is so that you locate it in a way that you can easily branch out to find an agricultural spot. You can easily branch out to reach your mining areas and your timber areas so that the infrastructure develops in a way that everybody benefits. I think that's an important point. And Nick talked about the Berbice River as a port. I would like to see Pomeroon as a port. Pomeroon is a major agricultural center, and so many goods come down. I challenge anybody to go to the Equitable River and see how much fruit, how much produce gets wasted there because they're waiting for the one ferry to come across, having no choice because your only local market of any size is Georgetown, and you can't access your foreign market. Pomeroon to Trinidad is a step. It should be easily done. And truth be told, there is some commerce going back and forth, but Pomeroon is not a port of entry. So that has necessarily to be small and kind of quiet. It needs to be formalized, and the infrastructure can grow incrementally, seeing what we have and building on it, rather than coming up with new revolutionary ideas.
Yeah. So and I want to bring in the minister on that. You've heard these two gentlemen, both in the private sector at the moment, and so on. Their emphasis, of course, is to use what we have already that will propel us into the future. Agriculture, tourism, the oil with the signing of the Payara and so on. So and there's probably a lot more industries. what's driving your ministry's strategy in terms of what you're putting out there in terms of infrastructure? What's the rhyme and rhythm, so that our viewers can understand that when we're talking bridge, or when we're talking about a road to let them, or between Ogle and Providence, are you looking at the issue with the lands and so on? What's the rhyme and rhythm within the ministry that's driving the headlines, and of course the investment in infrastructure?
Okay, thank you. So I heard the two esteemed gentlemen, and I also heard what you said concerning the budget being a private sector budget. I don't too agree with that, because I did respond to Mr. Jordan, and I said, it's a private sector budget, but it's a people's budget too, right? So I can spend the entire remainder of the time explaining to your viewers how it is a people's budget, how it's a proper approach budget. As you saw only yesterday.
Should there even be an apology for it being a private sector budget?
No, I'm not apologizing. I'm telling you, it's just not a private sector budget. It's a private sector budget. It's a people's budget. As you can see yesterday, if you were following our parliament, there's a whole host of broad measures that we reversed that benefited people. They didn't just benefit private sector businesses. They benefited people, right? So let's go to some of the infrastructure that we plan to do, and what is the driving force, as you call it, the rhyme and rhythm. So first of all, there were some items, which is the big headliners, that we had in the manifesto, right? And we are already on the ground working on them, right? The big headliners are the first one was the road that we are going to start sometime at the end of the year into the new year, which is the bypass road from Ogle to Hagsbush. It's a 4-lane road, right? That will connect. Then we have you saw myself and the President and Honorable Minister Jill as well, walking a alignment for the Demerara Harbor Bridge. That's another. But we also have some other big items on the, not just with the Ministry of Infrastructure, but Public Works, but the Ministry of Housing, Water, and then we have Agriculture, and then we have local government. All of those ministries have massive infrastructure spending in them. Right. So, but what's driving it? What's driving it is when we arrive here via a political process, and the political process involves us speaking to everybody in the hinterland, on the coastland, in the middle of the country, to the end of the country. Everybody have some form of infrastructure that they would like to see put in, either a road, a bridge, a culvert, a hospital, housing systems, either that, or they want ICT infrastructure, or Nicholas just talked about the Payara project, they want oil and gas infrastructure. So when you look at infrastructure, you got to look at the universe of infrastructure. So let's go to the first. Let me just go to the first couple of them. I'll defer to the oil and gas ones. I'll just say something broadly on them, because the Minister of Natural Resources will be speaking on those shortly. But the Payara project is the biggest ever project approved for Guyana. It's $9 billion, $9 billion US dollars. It's the biggest in the history, right? So that is infrastructure too. It's just that the infrastructure will be offshore, right? But what you will need, those are movable infrastructure. Onshore, you need infrastructure to support those. You need shore bases, you need proper roads, you need shipyards, you need welding yards, you need laydown facility, you need warehousing for storage of waste, storage of parts. It's never-ending infrastructure to support offshore operation that you have to have onshore. So that is part of what you call a rhyme and rhythm that is driving infrastructure. In addition to that, there are the basic infrastructure that you need to put in, like the roads that Timothy were talking about. Roads is a must. You must have proper roads. Look at the picture that you have up there with the interior roads. Interior roads need constant grading and shaping. Constant grading and shaping. We can do interior roads in the future as we go forward into our term in government. We can build them with asphaltic concrete, or we can do some of them with grading and shaping using the laterite that you see there. Now, when you talk about roads, the big ticket items, we have already started talking to the UKCIF and the financial institution which is that is funding this project from Linden to Mabura. It's 125 kilometers. I believe the figure that they had approved for that project is 140 million US. I think 3 point something was spent on the project design and so on. But that is another big one that we want to go to. In addition to that, the housing ministry have the president's promise to the people of 50,000 house lots in 5 years. That means 10,000 in a year. That means massive laying of pipe, electricity to run in that area, building of roads to be run in that area, right? In the areas that are identified for housing. So you'll find that massive infrastructure is needed in the housing sector too. When you talk about local government and how we go about doing the rural or we call miscellaneous roads and highways, that also is a big area for infrastructure, because we have to put the highways have to be one that is of a first world country. We have an oil and gas economy and we must behave like we have one. We must act like we have one. But the roads are in a bad place. There are some roads in the housing schemes and that we have that His Excellency, when he was minister, those roads that he put in, nobody after in the last government didn't do anything to do any to fix those roads. Those roads have some deep holes, as somebody just mentioned here on the program. Those holes are so deep, if you walk inside, alligator trying to bite out your foot. So we got to fix those things. We have to fix them, and we have things in the budget to fix them, but they will be done in phases. Remember, I just want you to remember, we have a budget, but 183 billion out of this budget already spent out. So the piece that we have to spend is just it's a piece of the budget for 3 months. So we can only do so much because there's only so much fiscal space that we found. We had to bring to book that 183 billion that was spent out from January to August, and we had to bring that to book so that it could be appropriated through Parliament and go on to the books legally, right? Because they had no budget for capital spend and so on for the whole year, as you know. So we have so much money to spend between now for current and capital to the end of the year, and we have to spend it to make sure that we bring some of these infrastructure projects that we want to bring that are the local ones. But the foreign funded ones are the big ones, like the expansion of, like the continuation of the road for phase 2 from Hagbosh to Diamond, and then Diamond to the airport, right? We are also thinking of the Del Conte Road that was in the manifesto. The president wants this as one of his vision project to move from Parika, Arctica, connecting you to Winnipiru, so that you have the interconnection of the roads. Then we also are looking at an alignment somewhere behind the current Fort Road at West Coast to Parika. There's an alignment at the back there that can bring you from Parika till to Schoonard.
Indar, if I could ask you again in a very similar kind of question. These projects, as you're aware, and our guests are aware, and probably all of our viewers, they're not like projects that you just dreamed up yesterday. That Guyana needs to be that road to Mabaruma, or the road to Lethem, or the bridge or whatever. They've been around for a long time. What kept us? And you're now in the ministry and you're dealing with at the government level. What kept the past governments from embracing these projects and just getting it done? Was it money? Was it will? Was it politics? What was it?
Well, that would be a question for when they come on your show. You should ask them that. But I will tell you that we, on the other side,
perspective.
Okay, so we from the other side, when we came into government, I'll just give you 3 quick examples of how we operate as against how they operated. There was that same project that you see in the news, which is the 50 million Indian loan project from Ogle to Hagbosh. That project was sitting in a desk here for 5 years. That project, when we looked at it, the project design was $208 million because they had a whole lot of connectors and it was running till to Diamond. And if you move beyond Hagbosh to Maka, then you go behind there, that piece of land is a lot of swamp. So you had to put a lot of earthworks there, and the earthworks carry up the costs. In addition to that, the design of the project that they did took into consideration something called a 1,000-year event for flooding, right? Rather than use a 100-year event. 2005 was 2005 was a 1,000-year event. You need to use a 100-year event, what we call height, to build up the earthworks. When you look at the difference between the 1,000-year event and the 100-year event in terms of building up the earthworks, you could have cut off 2.41 meters of earthworks throughout the entire 7.8 kilometers of road, and that save about around 13 million US, somewhere around there. So if you take off the connectors have, once you put a connector on a road, you got to put a culvert and a bridge. The culvert and the bridge carry up the cost. So you got to take those out. Remember, you only have a line of credit for 50 million. You can't go bring a project that value 208 million for a line of credit of 50. Who's going to fund the rest? Mm-hmm. So you have to work with what you have, design the project for what you have, and we are calling it phase one only. It is only phase one. So work can start whilst we be designing the second part, third part of the road, and getting more finance into the project. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we had the one with the ferry out of from Parika to Northwest. That project is there, sitting there, taking dust on the shelf. That project, in no time, we could have just sit down with the people from the Indian High Commission and said, listen, let's move around some of the sticking points and get this project moving, and the project started to move right away too. The other one was the Hinterland solar panel. That project is 10 million US. Actually, is 10 million US. Yeah, 10 million US sitting there for solar panels for the hinterland and riverine community. All you have to do is get the costs and see how you could get the wattage of it down to a level that you can get it to all of the communities in a big way, and work with the people. It was not done. President Irfan Ali, Vice President Dr. Jagdeo, myself, Bishop Edgel, and Mr. Taracham Balgobin. We sat down in 1 week and got all those things sorted out. All of them. So all it did is I guess it's a difference in approach than they had as what we have. But what we know, that we are seeing movement, we are seeing action being taken. Look, let's look at it. Look at what's going on with the EOIs. If you look at the newspaper, there are EOIs for hotels. We want more hotels. It's not even an EOI, it's a request for proposal. We want proposal. We're not even gone past the EOI stage, because everybody's interested. We want proposals now.
Yeah.
The same thing with the Harbor Bridge. So, and you'll continue to see more and more infrastructure project being done, right? I will allow Nicholas and them to tell you, because they have to get some time to talk on this program too, not me alone. They can tell you what is needed in the oil and gas sector in terms of shore bases and facilities to help construct aspects of an FPSO. Nicholas and them can tell you that, because they were in this discussion when we were in the private sector. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, well, one of the government corporation that falls under, I think, your purview would be the Guyana Power and Light, GPL. Can you talk a bit about GPL? I think that's an everyday kind of nuisance that has been bothering us for quite a while. I know I've seen some of your Facebook posts and so on, that you've gone out there and you're trying to put up a pole and fix things and whatever trees might have fallen and so on. So, but give us the next 6 months of GPL in terms of what you and your ministry plans to do to get it to a more stable, more reliable sort of generation.
So just let me make it clear for those who, there was a little change when the government came in, our government, and the energy sector now, for budgetary purposes and coordination and management, it's under the office of the Prime Minister. I've been asked by His Excellency the Prime Minister to manage the sector on a daily basis, which include GPL, Hinterland Electrification, which is the Hinterland region, GEA, and the Power Utility Upgrade Program. We call it PUUP, right? So GPL, yeah. You have seen in the past to talk about GPL as being one of the organizations that interfaces with every single man, woman, and child in the country. But there's not much money that was put into GPL over the past 5 years, other than $1 million US, capital to put load into the system, right? And those were some high-speed generators. Only recently, the government then, APNU Minister Jordan, former Minister Jordan, they put $10.6 10.67, somewhere around there, 10.67 billion Guyanese to buy 5 generators. These generators are low-speed generators. Each one of them generates 9.3 megawatts. So that will take it to 46.5 if you multiply the 5 generators. Each one of them weighs 150 metric tons. Big, big, big. They're huge systems. Those will come until 2021 when the civil works is finished. Civil works, it's about 19-20% completion as of maybe this morning. And that is going at the Garden of Eden plant. Now, we have to wait until then, because what you have now is you have a demand of 117.5 going up to 124.5, and your capacity, your installed capacity is around 120. But every single day, 2-3 generators out. Something wrong with something. If the lightning strike, the generator have a process where they protect themselves and they shut down. When you restart them and they start putting load into the system and they go through the transmission line, a switch blow, you get blackout. So all of these issues, they need addressing in a holistic way. What we have done, we have signed up an agreement with Giftland, which is MCG, is a company, to put 5 megawatt of power into the grid. That process is being currently worked out with them to now connect onto the grid. The other one is we put out an EOI for 30 megawatts. We got over 40 companies who bid for those. Right now, the persons are putting in their bid and they're reviewing those, right? So that we could get more we call base load into the system. Once you get that, at least you could be maintaining the generators based on your running hours. You can, if there is a fault in the system, you can have backup power. We call it the revolving load that you need to have. We call it spare capacity. We have none. So any issue, you get blackout. And then that's just on the generation side. You have also the transmission side where you have, the switches on the pole give problems. You have transformers going out. So you have GPL have a lot of issues. There's a new board there. There's some aspect of new management there, and I'm hoping that they can work just as hard as everybody else to make sure that we deliver. We just keep the lights on, because that can be an embarrassment, and we're not in the business of that. We just want to get the people work done.
Yeah, and Nicholas, I want to bring you here, and I know over the past few weeks I've read some articles and so on where you've talked about energy too, that price need to drop, and to make Guyanese manufacturers and Guyanese business a lot more competitive. What were you hoping from the minister to hear from the minister as relates to GPL, and what do you expect?
Well, I think the key things that we would look for in GPL, first, as Indar identified, we need to, you have in short term a number of things GPL can do to improve reliability and supply, right? But longer term, there were 2 major projects that were discussed, which was gas to shore, as well as the reintroduction of the Amila Falls project as something that is a project that Guyana should embark on, because the idea is that over time we would kind of green our sources of energy or move to less polluting sources of energy, and would also still be able to bring down the cost of energy. Now, for us in manufacturing and a number of other sectors, power is a major barrier. Because when you look at the region, and particularly we compete with, for instance, Trinidad and Tobago, who subsidize power costs to their manufacturers. So you look at let's say if you were to look at the P&Ls of some of their manufacturers, and in fact, Exxon's Center for Local Business Development here had done a study, an economic study, and part of it, they'd shown the cost of energy and benchmark it across countries like Trinidad and Tobago, and you can see a marked difference. Trinidad is sub 20 cents per US kilowatt hour, somewhere around 16. We are nearly 30 some, up or down depending on the taxation, fuel costs, etc. Right? And so for us, as the private sector, we are looking forward to that investment into GPL. So again, let's say short, medium, and long. Short meaning, things that I've seen that the Indar's ministry has done, which is they went out to get expressions of interest from independent power producers. There's a number of investments that have to be made to improve, because the way the grid is designed, they need to have some amount of plans in place for backup. And then, medium term being the gas to shore project, where we utilize that gas that is that is associated with the oil, bringing that to shore and having that reduce our energy costs. And then longer term being the Amila Falls, which is a project that would, one, be able to produce enough power that we could export power. Because that in 2011 through 13, when I was on the manifestos in those times, it looked at exporting power to, I think it was Venezuela, Brazil, and it would basically knock out our emissions levels compared to, because most of GPL's current generation is based on heavy fuel oils, which have a high sulfur content. Absolutely. So it's highly polluting. So for us, it's really important. And the reason why the polluting aspect is also important, if you listen to the Vice President Jagdeo, he has put LCDS back on the agenda. And so, I mean, the LCDS essentially is a carbon trading mechanism. So for us, going forward, if we can get paid for not producing so much carbon into the atmosphere, that's actually a revenue stream, right? Mm-hmm. So everything we're talking about here as it relates to energy is dollars and cents. Whether it is dollars and cents in savings to the average consumer, whether it is dollars and cents that allows the opening up of a new sector such as manufacturing, moving our manufacturing industry from a state of just final transformation of semi-processed materials to actually taking raw materials through that value added, raw materials, let's say semi-processed and final processing. And that is something that we would be looking for from the power company of the future, let's say.
Well, that was well said. We'll take a quick break right now, and we'll be back in a minute, so that we can take this conversation to a different level.
To wash your hands constantly and always wear your mask. A friendly reminder from Globespan 24x7 management and staff.
Logistics International, based in Trinidad with representatives in Guyana, is pleased to announce its shipping services from Trinidad to Guyana. Logistics provides shipping services and has experienced personnel to handle all of your shipping needs from Trinidad to Guyana. Buy in Trinidad and let Logistics handle all of your shipping to Guyana, from small boxes to container sizes. Call Logistics in Trinidad at 1-868-336-8218 to handle all of your shipping needs, and they handle all sizes. Logistics International has been shipping for over 22 years to many Caribbean countries with reliability and dependability. Call 1-868-336-8218 in Trinidad. That's 1-868-336-8218. Or email at liclcargo@gmail.com.
Looking for a space to rent? We have space available for offices, apartments, and retails. We have 2 locations available on Lot 3A North Road, Georgetown, and Lot 55 South Public Road, Rose Hall Town. Contact us today for more information. You can contact 624-0692 or 337-4287.
Well, good night again, and welcome to this special program on Globespan. We're talking about moving forward, and that's the only thing we should be talking about, really. We've been stagnant for quite a while, so moving forward is, of course, a fresh thought, and we have qualified guys who can really handle this conversation. So we've been talking about infrastructure. We talk about bridge, and things are happening. Hotel RFPs for hotel, and billions, literally billions of dollars that will be available for contracts. And I want to get Timothy into the conversation here. This has been one of our problems. Guyana has many problems. One of it is managing our contract in a transparent and accountable way, so that everybody feels that the contracts are going to evenly to whoever bids, and more importantly, that we're getting the kind of quality of work that we deserve. How do we move from that kind of reference point that we know about contracts and infrastructure into one that we know that we're building roads that will last, that we will provide contracts that's accountable and transparent to everyone? Help me here with that question, Timothy.
So much has been discussed just in the last 10-15 minutes. I want to answer all of it, but let me point to the common thread that I did notice. And what I noticed is an assumption about the centralization of power and the centralization of decision making. And I think that is a wrong approach. That needs to be decentralized. Let me give you some examples. Dio said we need hotels. Well, as much as I have great regard for him and his acumen, if we need hotels, there is a supply and demand system that works, and some entrepreneur will turn up and put in a bid, get some land and build a hotel. And I happen to be personally aware that there have very recently been 3-4 large investors who have been looking for land space to put up their hotels. When we talk about infrastructure, a lot of the infrastructure we're talking about is private development by investors. It's not government expense. All government needs to do is facilitate it, is to provide the environment and provide the predictability in terms of our business environment so that investors are comfortable. They will come. Oil and gas is there and they will come. Now, when you translate that to what Nick is talking about, GPL, again, I'm going to disclose some information. In 1999, the then government invited some Irishmen to come and fix GEC because GEC was in such a hopeless, deplorable state that some people were getting 3-4 hours light a day. So the Irishmen came, signed big contracts, invested, and in fact, retained my firm. So I worked with the Irishmen from the time they came and learned something about electricity. There was an immediate improvement because they refixed the transmission system. They picked up on some losses in some areas of that there were inefficiencies. So there was an immediate fix. And then they ran into problems. And this is what I want to talk about. Because the government did not want electricity rates to go up, but the Irishmen needed to make their profit. So after a while, fell apart. The Irishmen went their way. I think they sold out for $1. For the country, I saw this as another foreign investor turned away, and therefore our rating on the foreign investor index going down. Government took over, and there are a lot of inefficiencies in the system because it is a government-run business. For example, a lot of people might not know, but the industrial consumers, the large consumers, subsidize the residences consumers. That is an untenable situation. If you got 200,000 residents, how are they being subsidized by the industrial folk? And how do you expect to have a manufacturing component or an industrial component using electricity when they're paying an inordinate amount of money? So that the result was that those same industrial consumers who should have been providing a profit for an efficient electricity company start self-generating. It doesn't work. And the reason that all of this takes place, you see, is that like all other government agencies, GPL doesn't want to decentralize the power. They want to keep the power. GPL should not be generating electricity. When you try to centralize power, what you do is you create an environment for corruption by Generating, by keeping that power, I look after how to buy generators, how to lease generators, like we leased the Wardzilla. The Wardzilla were the best generating equipment we had because the Wardzilla, the lessors, the people that leased to us, used to come and maintain it. We decided we could do that ourselves, so we fired them. Right away, we started getting blackouts again, and we ran into problems with the Wardzilla. We created a whole company, a separate company from GPL, that was a subsidiary of GPL, created a whole infrastructure, paid a whole new set of people to do nothing at all because GPL was already dealing with the Wardzilla, having taken it over, fired the Wardzilla owners who were maintaining it. You have to decentralize, not bring it in. So that if you have some straightforward contracts where you agree to buy from a private investor so many kilowatts of power at a specific price, and you give the incentives to the investor, the role of GPL becomes much smaller. It simply then is a transmission company, a maintenance company. Decentralize the generation aspect. Now, this has met with so much resistance. I acted for a Bayesian company that wanted to come down here and use timber byproducts to burn, make coal, and use to generate electricity. They got squeezed out. I dealt with some folk who wanted to set up windmills in Berbice. They got squeezed out. The reason they got squeezed out is not because they were bad. They weren't asking for favors. They were willing to make their own investment. They were squeezed out because the powers that be recognize that if you decentralize these contracts, you decentralize that power, you also decentralize avenues of revenue, avenues of illicit revenue. Because when you award a contract to build a generator or to fix a generator or to run this or to run that, by keeping all of those decision-making processes centralized, you create avenues for corruption. So I would like to recommend that those institutions should not be trying to keep all of the decision-making and all of the aspects of generation, transmission, maintenance, disconnection, all of those things internal. They should decentralize it, contract them out, so that their functions become more transparent.
Yeah.
Now, as another aspect of corruption and transparency, which you asked, and we saw it recently, we've seen boards being appointed. I want to give you the example that came up the other day of the Commission of Lands and Surveys being exposed, whether it was true or not, I don't know, in terms of having purchased from Lands and Surveys Commission a Land Cruiser that they say was valued $25 million. He paid $2.5 million for it. The board, they said, approved this thing. The board is a board appointed by the government. The APNU government appointed that board, Lands and Surveys Commission, and when this new government came in, they uncovered that this thing had happened. A conflict of interest, a purchase of a large asset from your own company at undervalue. If you had a single PPP individual on that board, it couldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. It could not have happened. The shoe is now on the other foot. I'm seeing boards being appointed. And I want to say that if you have a single APNU representative on those boards, you could not have a Land Cruiser being sold for $2.5 million. We mustn't think about individuals being honest, because all men have feet of clay. We have to try to make sure our systems are such that prevent corruption. And I would like to see the boards that I see being appointed. I don't like how it's being done, and I must admit, there was some initial talk about small parties bringing in, having representatives on the boards and that kind of thing. Enough hasn't been done. The more independent folk, the more opposition you have on those boards, the greater your transparency. And I would like to see that. I do not want to see a situation like we've seen, where you hear the CEO of Gaisuku is appointed, and then the board is appointed. Mm-hmm. The board must appoint the CEO. The government mustn't appoint the CEO and then put in their own board. And that's happened at Central Housing. That's happened at Gaiwa. That's happened all over already. We have a rotation where 5 years ago, we saw APNU putting in their own friends and family into positions, and I'm afraid we're already seeing it. Yeah. That is not good for transparency.
If I can have, the minister respond to your to your thoughts on GPL. Minister, what are your thoughts on GPL becoming a distributor and decentralizing the generation and practically, you know, outside of government, having private private power producers supplying the GPL grid. What are your thoughts on it? Of course,
before you answer, Joe, can I point out that New York City does that?
Most of America, all of America does that. And bear in mind that GPL, if we continue to just polish the old shoe, it will continue to hurt our feet, right? And you know, we've had successive government trying to do the same thing. Is it time? And I know you from the private sector, you're probably looking at shifting paradigms as it relates to how we manage our resources and our activities. Is this something that you might want to consider and kind of broaden the discussion within the ministry and at GPL?
Well, first, Timothy's views on decentralizing of power is one that needs discussion. But let's take it down to GPL. At a 30,000 feet level, his views have some merit and you can look at it. But then you have to go down to the devil in the details. And the devil in the details will tell you what the problems are, and then you go back and test his 30,000 feet view. So let me tell you some of the issues that will test the 30,000 feet view that Mr. Jonas just put forward. Do you know at GPL, at a manager's level, they are unionized? At manager's level, they're unionized. Have you ever heard that anywhere else? I can't remember anywhere else in Guyana, at least. I have not heard that. But then when you have a certain kind of culture in an organization, it presents a peculiar set of difficulties. In addition to that, GPL, they have some level of power to recommend increase in rates. Obviously, you got to go to the Public Utilities Commission and so on, right? If you continue, if you divest and you put it into to the hands of private owners and the rates start going up, what do you tell your population then when you have no power over it? What do you go and tell your population then? I understand the issue of supply and demand. Supply and demand works in a framework when they have multiple suppliers. You have one.
Minister, I mean, a lot of the Caribbean nations, including Trinidad, has private
Salim, I'm question talking here. I'm not asking a question. I'm question talking. I'm saying that where are the other suppliers? Same thing for GWI and the other services that you have one sole provider of the services, right? So I do get the issue that he's saying. There is merit. Decentralization of these things do have merits, but then they have the demerits too. Same way with centralizing. It is a conversation that we all must have, because if we get it wrong, all of us are going to feel it too. Because as I said in my opening remarks, that GPL is one of those institutions that touch every man, woman, and child in Guyana. But I want to go to the other issue that Timothy mentioned.
Before you do, can I answer that? Because there's an answer to that, you see. I'm aware of this because, as I said, I've dealt with the contracts and I've dealt with the investors. When they come to invest and they go to GPL and say, I can generate and supply you electricity, you agree on the rate in advance. So they're not coming to you to offer to supply electricity at some exorbitant rate. They're doing it at the rate demonstrating that it's better rate.
If I'm an investor and I come into a country, I don't know what my future cost of operation will be, so I can't agree on a rate that will last for a lifetime. Your rate that
you are now worrying about the investor. I think you need to worry about your side of the contract. If the investor comes to offer something and is bound by it, all is well. But the other point that I think you're not considering is that right now you're subsidizing GPL. The government subsidizes GPL. But if generation can be done more efficiently by an investor who is giving you a price in advance, that same subsidization that you're doing now certainly can also help. But I'm saying that the generation process can be more efficient. So
Minister, I want to ask you, today in the newspapers, Gaisuco has an EOI for private investors to join them. So why isn't there like a similar EOI for GPL using the same model? If Gaisuco has not been working, managing its own affairs through the government ownership alone, why can't the same principle be applied to GPL, which has been a nuisance for 50 years?
Yeah, so I get what you're saying, right? What I said to you is that the comments of Mr. Timothy Jonas is recognized. I believe if you have a position, let's discuss the position. But what I want to say is that when he says that GPL is being subsidized by government, it's both. That is a half truth. Let me tell you, and I've said this in my parliamentary speech. The government over the last 4 or 5 years owes GPL $13.1 billion. If that money was paid to GPL, GPL would not have needed any subvention money. If people just paid their light bills, they would not have needed not a black cent they would not need from government. So GPL is generating power. They're charging consumers for it. And if all consumers, whether it's government, private sector, pay that bill, GPL would be one of those institutions that generate positive cash flows to carry on their operation. They can, and because of that, because they're a public corporation, they can enter into loan agreements, they can enter into finance agreements and so on. So it is not completely true to say that they are being subsidized by government, but the only reason for that is what you call a symptom rather than a root cause. The root cause of the problem is people not paying the bills, right? So I just want to clear that up for the listeners who are listening there. But to answer your question, Salim, about having private investors come in, listen, nobody is averse to private investors coming in. But I said to you that if you're going to make these, this is what I term a seismic change. And if you have these kind of seismic change, you must have proper analysis. When investors come in, they must understand what they're getting into, because they come in for more than 2 years and then they leave and they put in a set of plans and then you got to pick up again. So what you have to do is discuss Mr. Jonas's suggestion properly. Have proper consultation. And if the way is clear and if there is justification for that kind of movement, well, then who says you can't have it? But at this point, we cannot sit on a TV on a show online and so on and says that this is the case and we should go to decisions of this nature that affect so much of Guyanese should be properly thought of.
Absolutely. And I'm glad.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, and here's where I have a problem. Again, there is centralizing power, centralizing authority. He's taking to himself the decision whether an investor can consider it feasible to come spend the investor's money, build a generation plant, and offer to sell electricity at a price. In a supply and demand situation, the investor makes that decision for himself using his own capital, his own finance, and he sinks or he swims. You come to me and say, electricity is now costing $40 a kilowatt hour. I can supply it to you for $29. I say, go strong. There's your piece of land. You have it for free. Use your duty free. Use your money and build your plant and supply me. If you work, I'm happy. If you don't work, it's no skin off my nose. But don't try as a government to take to yourself. It's a very socialist approach, and I don't agree with it. The decision making as to whether that foreign investor got a good plan or not. He's spending his own money. Let him spend his money and take his chances. I saw it happen, as I said, 3 different generations, 3 different companies, investors that wanted to come in and build.
So Timothy, can you tell the viewers then what made the last set of private investors in GPL leave? Why did they leave?
You're asking me to disclose information that I can't disclose.
It's public information. They wanted increase in rates, but did they get it?
Who wanted? No. I'm sorry. You're asking me about people who wanted to come to invest.
No. Who were when GPL was being run? We had some private owners in there.
Back in the early 2000s.
Well, you had referenced
they were asking for increased rates. Why did they leave?
You're talking about the Irishman?
You're telling me that, Mr. Jonas, you're telling me that I am consolidating decision. I didn't decide on anything. I'm saying to you that your suggestion, if it have merit or don't have merit, we have to sit down and discuss it and consult with everybody involved. What I said is that the last time they had private people in there, they wanted to raise the rates. And I remember I was growing up in the time, and it didn't happen.
Right.
GPL.
You're talking internally in GPL. But I'm talking about someone who's just coming to say, look, I can put down a generation plant and I can sell you at so much kilowatt hours. So if I can do that.
Yeah. But if you're talking now, the investors want to come and look at GPL to take over the power generation, well, we will sit and have those conversations. Yeah. We are not
not a single person. If you put all your eggs in one basket, you run into problems. Yeah. But if your needs are 100 and I can supply you with 20 cheaper, take the 20. Somebody else will come with 20. Somebody with 20.
We have one provider, Timothy. Our eggs in one basket, and we got to be careful how we treat it.
Yeah, it goes without saying that most of the energy produced around the world is privately produced, and they are lower than Guyana, and they're all making a profit, at lower price. Where I live in Florida, we pay between 9 to 10 cents. In the U.S.,
you don't get blackout like I just did.
30 cents, But it just means.
But Salim, you got to put this thing into context here.
No, but
how does Florida generates its power? What mode of power do they generate? Is it diesel power? Is it heavy fuel, or is it nuclear power?
It's a mix of electric of thing, and I think that is one of the issues too that bring reliability to GPL is a deeper mix of renewables and fossil fuels. Whether it's wind or solar or as you guys are pursuing the hydro project, hydro project is going to take 3 to 5 years to get on stream. Guyanese need light now, so to speak.
Well, that's the key thing that you just mentioned here. It's what we're going to do to bridge this thing. Nicholas mentioned it. One of them is the gas to shore project, which is using the natural gas, and that will be able to carry down costs significantly.
Correct.
60+% significant reduction in the cost of fuel, and that will help every aspect of society: manufacturing, retail, households, you name it. Once power goes down, everything else goes down. All investment analysis start looking better because the cost is now suppressed and reduced. So that is where you can look into to deal with this thing on a longer term perspective.
We've got about 15 minutes more. I just want to get in some more very critical discussion. And Indar, I want your thoughts on this. Much of the infrastructure that we're talking about will cost billions. There'll be contracts that will be awarded. There'll be bids that will be sent out, and RFPs and everything else. How do we, and for the listeners out there, how do we develop a transparent, accountable, less corrupt system? Because this has been one of the issues plaguing Guyana for decades. When people hear a bridge building, it means that some friends getting some contract. When people hear a road building, it means that there's some, it's going to be built instead of 6 inches, 2 inch. How do we protect money that we borrow to get these things done, or grants that we get, or taxpayers' money? How do we protect it in terms of accountability, less corruption, transparency, and more importantly, the ability for these infrastructure to last, more than 10 years at minimum, So if you can shed some light on that, because there's billions of dollars.
Well, first I have to say to you, Salim, is that protecting Guyana's perception, whether it's corruption is real or not real, is not just the government's job, it's everybody's job. I remember looking at many posts, newspaper article, online art that speaks about corruption in my day, before I became government minister, long before that, since I was in the private sector. Everybody, they talk about corruption, and they don't have the facts, but yet they peddle this thing, and we continue to carry it on. From news agencies to people to the personal social media space, everybody have a responsibility to make sure that we put information that is credible out there. Everybody. So that is the larger view.
Yeah, then it comes to government. That's not a system. That's just a goodwill that people should not talk about that corruption is happening. But I want to hear from your perspective as a minister what you can put in place to ensure that these things can happen.
Yeah. So for when it comes down to government procurement systems, right? Government procurement systems are governed by the Procurement Act of 2003, right? I am new to government. I know all of the stories that were written in the past. Most of them you will see in the newspaper and around the place about corruption in procurement, right? But I am saying to you, from my standpoint, in this ministry standpoint, that procurement of contracts will follow law. They will follow the design procedures that are established by MPTAP, or if it's a ministry, tender board, or whatever it is, the design procedures, they are subject to scrutiny, and those are what we will follow, right? And I can say that is the overarching view of our president, our vice president, prime minister, that this government here, we're going to make sure that we do everything in our capacity to make sure that we run a clean government. Right, I can tell you that. You will see that from me. We are very transparent. Look at what Nicholas mentioned just now about the Payara thing. I think it's published. Isn't it published, Nicholas? Did you see it?
Yeah, it's in the news. It's in oil now, right now.
It was published, right? So those things, that is what we envisage, that is how we will conduct ourselves as a government. That is what we intend to do with procurement throughout the globe. Every single country, there is some level of bad behavior by public officials. Every country has this problem.
And
Guyana,
what you've just mentioned is really great, and I believe you that you are going to take steps to bring higher level of accountability. But for our viewers again, what specifically you're going to put in place? Is there going to be like a website where we can see all these contracts in full view, and you know, what is it that tangibly will significantly suspect corruption?
Only the last weekend, if you look at the newspapers, and tomorrow, today was Wednesday. Throughout the days, you saw a whole host of projects being put in the newspaper for public bidding, competitive bidding. If you check from roads to you name it, everything was in.
Yeah, almost half of the newspaper is EOIs.
It's EOIs and public advertisement for bidding, competitive bidding, right? Those, when they're open, it's open in front of people. You see who bid how much. It's written down. That is how the process works, right? That is how the process works. I can't speak for people. I cannot speak for people before me in the many decades before me. I can only speak for now, right? And you must respect that position. Absolutely. But I'm saying to you, we have a law, the Procurement Act, and that have to be followed stringently.
And any one of you guys can take a stab at this. It's no secret that we live in a multi-ethnic society where there are significant Africans and significant Indians. In distributing these contracts, how will you do it to ensure that we do it so that we don't have the perception that one group is getting it? In this case, we might be labeled that, you know, a lot of Indians will be getting contracts, you know, for the roads and, you know, for whatever it is. What system do we have in place to ensure equitable bidding and equitable awarding of contracts for these projects? Any one of you?
Well, I can answer if those guys don't want to answer. I can answer. I'm in government. I would answer. Mm-hmm. Okay, so listen, government doesn't see color. We govern for every single Guyanese.
Everybody doesn't see color.
For every single Guyanese, right? The contract and award and procurement of contract is an open process whereby it's published and you got to bid competitively, right? So when the evaluators look at what you bid with your technical competence and your financial competence and your experience, that is how you're awarded. And evaluate one person.
Try to lift communities up by maybe providing X amount to small business, X amount to ensure that it's equitable distribution. All over the world they do it. In America they have the small business, the colored business sort of approach.
No, but there is a small business. There is a small business component in the Small Business Act. Nicholas, you know about this, where 20% of contracts is supposed to be given to small businesses. Okay. So successive governments have struggled with this thing before. it's not a quick fix. You have to work around it. You have to make sure it's the law that is there, that everybody have to work towards fulfilling that law, right? Every government successively was criticized for not doing it. I'm going to tell you that we are trying our best to make sure it goes into the hands of micro, small businesses, right? So that they can get into it, they can benefit from public spending in a competitive process, as I said.
Yeah. And how about if someone labels that you need to have more Africans also being awarded these projects, African-owned businesses? Listen,
anybody, mixed people, Amerindian people, Indian people, Afro people, Portuguese people, whatever your ethnic background is, all of we have a stake in Guyana, Salim. All of we born here. Everybody pay taxes. The grandmother, the parents, the auntie, the uncle, they pay. We all Guyanese. We all have a stake here, so we all should benefit from whatever projects or contracts are out there. But at the end of the day, it have to come through a competitive process.
Absolutely. So I want to ask all you guys now, with all this infrastructure and the potential for development, we've signed a new oil deal. We're talking about creating a conducive business environment, being competitive, growing the economy 51% over the next few years. Who's going to get this done? And I heard you, Minister, in your presentation talking about all the tax incentives that will be given to schools to kind of upskill everyone and kind of build schools and vocations and all that kind of stuff, which is very positive. But with all of that, and maybe Nicholas, you can take the first stab at it. Where are we going to get the people to get this done? Whether in Guyana or out of Guyana, how is this going to unfold? Because infrastructure is great, but if we're not going to get the people to kind of drive the economy, what's your diagnosis?
You're balling some serious balls here tonight, Sam. So, I mean, the economist answer, right? It's just the numbers. So you're sitting first with a diaspora population of over 1 million plus, right? And they have immediate access to Guyanese passports and citizenship. So that's step one. Step two, you have a Caribbean community that you are in a treaty with that allows for the free movement of skilled labor. And when it was good for us exporting labor, you have a number of Guyanese communities across Barbados, Trinidad, because they had building booms, right? So for Trinidad, it would be in the oil industry. For the rest of the Caribbean, it would have been the tourism industry, resorts, etc., right? So we exported Guyanese to go build those. And then right next door in our neighboring country, we have a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela that is basically affecting 50-some million people. So take your pick, whether you look at it as the million plus Guyanese diaspora, the million plus in the CARICOM who have free movement of labor, and the 53 million people who sit next door. How many people you need to build out the country? Mm-hmm. which millions you want to come from? The point is that you're going to see inward migration, and what's going to happen, what we need to do is to prevent xenophobia from taking place, right? That's where we need to start. We need to have structured routes of migration where, one, you need to benefit as a Guyanese citizen, and we want to make sure that we protect Guyanese citizens and make them feel that there is the benefits to being citizens. Mm-hmm. Similarly, we want to make sure that we are able to create programs to intake migrants and make them part of the communities. Because when you sit with a neighbor who has 53 million people, you think about it for a second. If you open the floodgates, we are lucky that the developed side of Venezuela is to the west, mm-hmm. right? Not to the east where we share our borders with them. Colombia, for instance, ended up with 1 million Venezuelan refugees. Think about that for a minute. 1 million Venezuelan refugees, right? I've seen in Europe, they had to create a whole host of programs to integrate the migrants they got from the Middle East and Africa into the communities, because if you don't, you have rapid growth of crime and organized crime spreading, right? So we need to focus on how we treaties with the inward flow of labor. I'm not worried that whether we will get that flow. That flow is a natural Adam Smith invisible hand inevitability. But where government needs to take a role is how we manage the inflow and how we build the communities to receive them and how we treaties with them. Because right now you actually have a very easy pathway to Guyanese citizenship. It is actually quite easy, especially if you're a Commonwealth citizen, to make it to Guyanese citizenship. So we have a number of questions. We have to really have, sit down and have honest conversations about, do we want to keep it that way, right?
I'm not have the private sector done an analysis of the HR need that Guyana will require over the next 5 years, and what are some of the policies that needs to be in place? Do you have a number, like for example, how many people we need?
So the answer is I don't have a number, but we've had a number of discussions where we have internally some idea. For instance, Indar talked about welding and fabrication. I have a particular startup in the oil and gas industry where I'm trying to train welders and fabricators. The key is that you're going to have a number of different skill sets that are necessary, from those that are turning the actual bolts in the infrastructure build out to the administrative level in those who are managing the projects and managing the people who are turning the bolts. And similarly, you got the kind of the understanding of how we're going to retool institutions like the University of Guyana, how we're going to improve, because Guyana cannot send our students abroad anymore to do 2 years to become a lawyer. That should be a thing of the past, right? And we need to look at what the disciplines that are going to be needed, and how do we retool the institutions such as University of Guyana, as well as the vocational training institutions. You have a number of them, and bring up the level of the curriculum to what you are looking for in a more modern industry. You look at Trinidad and Tobago, I refer to them because they're obviously within region. Wherever you find oil and gas hub in Trinidad and Tobago, you'll find a University of Trinidad and Tobago, and that's not to be thought of as a full-fledged university. That's a vocational institute where you go in, get certified, and come out as a professional to be able to go and turn the nuts and bolts in that particular industry. And that's by design, that's not by accident. So there's a role for government, the private sector, as well as civil society to sit down and start having these discussions about how we are going to, as a society as a whole, receive not just the diaspora, but the foreigners who are going to come in. And we need not to be xenophobic, but to do that and prevent the rise of xenophobia, we have to have programs in place to integrate everybody so that we have a nice melting pot.
Good. Well, I see Indar is on the phone, but I was gonna get to you, Indar. My question to you was, have you guys done your analysis of the HR needs that might be needed within the next few years, at least in your sphere of influence with the ministry, and how will you go about attracting and keeping these skilled and the talent that we'll need?
Well, Guyana has been suffering from that for decades now.
If you can, I would just like if you can also talk a bit about the tax incentives that might be kind of related to this subject.
Yeah, so Guyana has been suffering from brain drain for millennia.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, and that was the biggest thing. How do you deal with it? But now there is a turning of the tide. A lot of people are coming back to Guyana now because we are an oil producing nation. Now, talking about the skill needs, the new Ministry of Labor, I'm sure is on the Honorable Minister Joe Hamilton is looking at that. I can tell you that he's looking at that in addition to Minister Sonia Parag, right? But remember, the oil and gas industry is one that is a new industry, and the newness of the job requirements, the newness of all of the labor requirements is one that Guyana is still learning to. Remember, we are the traditional sectors, we know about those, but the new sector and the new all of the subcontractors and so those kind of jobs are new jobs. We don't have a drilling school here, sir. We need one. We don't have a chemical engineering school. We need, right? We need many things, but we gotta understand what we need and match them with what are the jobs out there. And it's a learning process as the industry unfolds and develop itself. That is how we have to work in tandem with that development. Talking about the tax measure really is removal of 25% on corporation tax for institutions that are involved in investment in education in Guyana. So you're not paying no tax on the profits there, right? 25% is gone, it's removed. That will enable schools to come and invest, whether it's a trade school, a TVET school, whether it's a law school, an engineering school, a drilling school, you name it. You come and you invest, and you don't pay taxes on your profits. That money can be used to save up on reserves, to expand your business as you go along, or to reinvest in your business, right? It makes it a profitable venture now to come to Guyana and invest in education. And this is for all sectors. It's not for one, it's for all sectors. All right, thanks.
Great. Well, we're about program time, so I'm going to ask Timothy, and then I'll move on to you guys to make your closing remarks. But Timothy, what's your thoughts on the whole skills issue? How do we go around that and to ensure that we do get the 51% growth in the economy over the next 5-10 years?
I think it's a non-issue. The oil and gas industry has its satellite industries, and those boys are already flocking in, hoping to make money off of oil and gas. It's true Guyana doesn't have the skill set, doesn't matter. We have Trinidadians coming in here, we have people coming in from Canada, from all over the world to work with ExxonMobil, to make money from ExxonMobil. And you will see gradually Guyanese integrating into that. What we have to do is we have to evolve our education system so that Guyanese are trained, Guyanese have access to the best education. I don't agree that the education all needs to be in Guyana. If you're a Kuwaiti citizen and you want to go and study and do a degree, you get a scholarship to do it automatically. And Guyana needs to be like that. My best education here, speaking for myself personally, and I know Nick had the same experience, and I'm sure he may agree. Your learning curve is when you go abroad and you see how it is done in the first world. You see what the possibilities are. We don't know how provincial we are in Guyana until you go abroad and see how it can be done, with the possibilities that exist out there. You have to go abroad, learn that, and then bring that back. So yes, I agree, vocational schools need to be done here. But Guyanese, if they choose, if they have the aptitude, they need to have easy access, scholarships, go abroad, get your degree, get your master's, get your PhD. That is where your future core of engineers, of administrators, of top level employees and businessmen will be. So that right now our skill sets makes us no better than supervisory. We're menial. We are the people at the bottom. That should not be the case 10, 15, 20 years from now. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I really think we have to be careful about is citizenship issues. We have to ensure that it is not easy for foreigners to get Guyanese citizenship. When they are coming in, and they will be coming in, they're already flooding us. They must pay for their visas to come in. They must demonstrate that they have jobs waiting for them. We must embrace the people who are needy, like the Venezuelans. We can't exclude people, we must embrace them. But when you've got men with cowboy hats coming in, they must pay for their visas. They must demonstrate a skill set and an aptitude. They must demonstrate that they have the wherewithal to live and to earn their way. and to pay their fair taxes. And in the meantime, we must be training Guyanese so that the next generation can replace those same boys with the big cowboy hats. That is how we have to do it.
Absolutely.
There's no two ways about it.
Nick, your final thoughts on infrastructure and development?
I'm going to keep it short. The thing is, infrastructure is going to be key and critical to our development. We need to see, and we're seeing, some amount of well thought out plans, which include from financing down to delivery of the infrastructure. And the private sector stands ready to be right there to invest alongside, because that infrastructure will open up new lands for development, whether it's for housing, industrial use, agriculture, and we will be right there ready to go, because I think overall everybody's excited for the future of Guyana. So for us, we are very excited to see the improvement and investment of infrastructure, into infrastructure.
Thank you. And Minister Indar, your final thoughts on the subject and your promise to our viewers on getting this done.
Well, it's a promise we made to all Guyana. But thank you very much for having me on the show. It's the first for me. I've been on many shows, but not this one. But thank you for having me. You've been a great host, and Timothy and Nicholas are extremely talented and educated panelists. I myself has traveled far and wide for my education. I've been to the UK, I've been to Canada, I've been to the US, I've been everywhere. What Timothy says have some merit, but we must also understand that in any developed country, what you see is the university system right next to the stock market. Because as the stock market churn out the professionals and the qualified people, they go into industry, and that circles work like that, right? And developed countries develop with that kind of system. Although we must have a broad range of a suite of measures how to get our people qualified and bring them up to speed. It is not a one-size-fits-all. It needs to be an all-of-the-above strategy. Training in country, training out of the country. We have in the TVET education, we have all of the technical schools. All of those will have to come together. The total sum effect of that will give us the kind of labor force we need. As I said again, it's not a quick fix. It's something that we have to work. And as they say in the countryside colloquially, one don't build somebody.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Minister. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Timothy, for a very, very engaging discussion. And this is not the first time we'll be talking about Guyana moving forward. We'll be talking a lot more on this. Today's headline in the Chronicle of all newspapers had creating a conducive business environment, and that is something that I think to create that environment, you really need infrastructure so that businesses can nurture themselves and grow and develop and so on. So with that, like Nicholas said, I'm excited that Guyana is making positive strides in the right direction. I'm a business person myself and into marketing and so on. And I know that the oxygen for business is the ability to grow and to be innovative and be creative. And if we don't have that, Guyana is not going to go anywhere. So I'm excited that things are happening that will allow business people to start breathing again and to start being creative and being innovative and entrepreneurial and to reach and provide solutions for all sorts of problems. With that, again, I want to say good night and thank you so much, my guests, for being with us tonight, and all of you who've taken time out from your busy schedule to be with us here tonight. For me, I lost 5 minutes of the NBA Game 1 finals, but I'm going to get back to it as soon as I'm done with this. But it was worth the 5 minutes to be with you guys. Thank you again and good night, and wish you all the best. God bless you.
All right.